What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the same. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Awesome. Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I'm going to formally introduce Aalap Shah in a second of 108.agency. Aalap, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes that are cool. And because of your business, there's been some really cool consumer brands I've had on the podcast. I had the founder of RX Bars on, Quest Nutrition on, Big League Chew on, Kettle Chips on. So there's been some cool ones. So check those out. And many, many more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for you to run your podcast. You know, Aalap, you know me a little bit by now. The number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. I found no better way to do that over the past decade to profile the people and companies I admire and, you know, have them on the podcast. So if you've thought about it, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us support@rise25.com. All right. And Aalap Shah is a Chicago-born entrepreneur, founder of 108, which is a performance marketing digital agency focused on driving sales for CPG companies nationwide on e-com and Amazon platforms. I'm the channel. You need to check them out. And they've worked with companies like Gildan, Sweet Leaf Tea, Vetnique Labs, just to name a few. And he's been recognized as a leader in Chicago's minority-owned digital marketing world. He's been recognized by multiple entities for his entrepreneurial and also charitable endeavors. And I dug a little bit of stuff up on you, Aalap, which is in 2013, Crain Chicago Business actually recognized you as one of Chicago's young emerging philanthropists. And also the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship as National Volunteer of the Year. Aalap, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeremy.
You know, we're going to dig deep into, you know, retention and engagement, you know, which I know you're thinking a lot about. So if you are a CPG company or you know a CPG company, you should listen to this episode. But I want to start off with the journey a little bit and a key pivotal moment where your dad got punched in the face.
Yeah. This was this is one of those moments that is stamped forever in your memory. You know, I feel like I was about 6 or 7. My parents owned a convenience store in Brighton Park. I still remember the scene, and, you know, it was just like maybe 2, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. My parents not only owned the store itself, the storefront, but they owned the building. I had a few apartments, and my dad, it was rent day. And so my dad went up the stairs to collect rent. And one of his tenants came out swinging, and I saw my dad punch Cole in the face. Here I am, 7, freaked out, thinking, oh my gosh, like, do I ever want to be an entrepreneur? Because this is tough. It's a tough scene.
It literally is getting punched in the face. I mean, entrepreneurs get punched in the face metaphorically, but your dad literally got punched.
Yeah. And I admire his tenacity, right? That's a tough job. And especially in that era, in the 80s and early 90s, of being kind of, you know, in that spot and actually not having a management company, right? Like actually physically going door to door and getting rent. I really admire him for that. But to see him get punched in some of the situations he's dealt with, I remember another moment in my youth where, you know, I went down the street to get a haircut. So I left my dad. I'm at his business. I literally walked down 4 storefronts to get a haircut. By the time I'd come back, I saw a slew of like cop cars because my dad actually had gotten robbed. He had his hands tied, and these folks, you know, had come in to steal money and some goods. And he got saved because like the back door, our store had 2 doors. The back door opened up, and it seemed as if someone's going to walk in, and those people fled. And that was just another scary moment, you know, that I saw kind of growing up, that again, I'll never forget, that you do work hard for your dollar, right? And you're putting yourself and your family at risk in that kind of situation, at least, to make it and to get to your dreams.
I mean, you still became an entrepreneur, even despite that. How did that impact you, those 2 scenarios?
I didn't want to. So I decided that, those situations and those scenes were probably not something that I wanted to encounter. So I decided to go to school for accounting. And I actually became a CPA, thinking, it'd be great to work in an office and travel the country. But that only lasted about a year and a half before I decided that I needed to jump in and open up my own retail business.
And I want to dig into that. I mean, you could have said, you know what, I could do entrepreneurship, but maybe I won't own a convenience store. But you were you were turned off from everything at that point.
I was, because growing up, my parents came here, I want to say at least 45 to 50 years ago. And I love their origin story and how they got to their first business. Their entire community kind of helped them raise funds. Really inspiring, these people, everyone coming together to help each other establish themselves. Seeing them working hard. I actually lived in the basement, or I was like, in my very early childhood, we lived underneath our store. And then just seeing my parents climb that success was really inspiring. But they worked hard and they made a lot of sacrifices throughout my childhood. And my parents, felt strongly that I should get, a designation of some sorts and have that kind of white collar job. And I didn't actually know that I wanted to be an accountant, but I just happened to get into DePaul's, accounting program and thought, well, this is a great way for me to pursue it. But little did I know, I watched my parents working 70, 80 hours a week. That's the same kind of job as a consultant too. And so as I worked week after week after week, I thought, well, if I'm just going to there's a cap on how much I can earn. And it's dictated by people that I might not necessarily be able to influence. Like I can make a buck. And I'd love to, try my hand at this journey. And, I do think entrepreneurship runs in your blood or can run in families and certainly did with me.
I mean, it wasn't scary enough for you to not do retail, right? And so talk about what you did next with the toy business.
Yeah. So, I was 23 and very naive for sure. Even though I had years and years and years of experience in retail, it was kind of a very different setting, like more tobacco and kind of convenience store merchandise stores. I wanted to go into the world of specialty toys because I wanted to have a niche and I wanted to make, families smile and kind of come together, right? There's something so appealing to me about selling Legos and like puzzles and like games and stuff like that I thought I could create a really interesting business around. And probably like a safer route because the types of people are coming are generally families and grandparents and whatnot, right? So I kind of could alleviate my risk of getting punched in the face there. And it just turned out to be just a really great jumping board or springboard for me to like learn about how to build a community, how to market, how to create like loyalty and retention, and create a successful, community center. And all of those things I just mentioned, by the way, is what we call social media today, right? Like all those skills and tactics kind of go into building a great community online. I just happened to do it the old-fashioned way, person by person as they walked into my business.
And then you had more than one location as well.
I did. I really had this vision of becoming the dominant, toy store retailer in the Chicago region. And I was able to open up a second location, with really the support of my family, and just learning from them. And what happened is that when I opened up my second location, customers started coming in with their iPhones and showcasing to me how much things cost on Amazon. And these prices were insane, like usually like 10% or 20% margin type of situations where there was just no way I would be able to compete with this long term. I'd reached kind of to the top of like my sales for both stores. And I thought this would be a great time to sell, kind of just watching my parents my entire life, working, building businesses, selling high, kind of starting over again. I thought this was a great time for me to exit because everybody started getting into specialty toys. Like back then, Borders, if you remember that chain, Target, all these places were getting the specialty toys because it was a high margin business. So I decided to just exit before it became it. I decided to exit before I would be in a situation where I'd just be losing money on each sale.
Yeah. And how was the exit process?
It was horrible.
It was horrible.
In the sense of, I had no idea what I was doing, right? So I think by this time I was 7 years in, and I had no experience in selling a business. And the buyers that I sold to were wonderful people and just incredible. But the process itself was just an opportunity for me to learn, what kinds of things, what it takes to actually sell a business. And the critical mistake that I had made was, as I was preparing the business for sale, I kind of took the gas off running the business. So whereas my sales were going kind of at a great clip, just by not paying attention to the day-to-day of my business, I put myself in a position where I had to make some tough choices in terms of the sale price and the exit and the deal terms.
What were you doing to drive customers? I feel like, you get someone off their couch to drive in a car to come in and buy a toy. Now people are like, they don't even have to move their arm. They could just touch with their thumb on Amazon now. So what were you, that will work anywhere, probably the methodology that you used to get them out of their comfortable home?
I'd say I did three things pretty well. One is, back in those days, that invisible text against dark background for SEO worked great. That black hat SEO type of, in the early part of the century, I guess, was a great tactic. Email marketing and Facebook, number two. That's something that I just mastered and was able to really leverage to build my community. The third, which is something that I see today that is so vitally important, is that experience. People walking into my store had an experience. Like, I had trained my team. We had created these interactive kind of almost like where you could touch, see, feel, hear the product. Just insane amounts of demos, like learning all the games that we had, just creating that kind of play environment really kept people coming into the store. And just, I know some parents probably wanted to drop off their kids, and now being a parent, I can understand that feeling. We just made it really fun. And we had these just incredible opportunities to connect with the consumer and get to know them and build that relationship. And I feel strongly that the retailers that are very active growth mode today are leaning and tapping into that experiential component of retail.
So how'd you get into the agency world? Because next you sold, and the next was an agency.
And it's a really interesting way that I got into the agency world. So I sold my business in September. I took some time off. I traveled. I had just gotten married maybe a year or two prior to that. And I picked up a copy of Crain Chicago, because back then you actually read newspapers. And I read a spotlight on someone that I very much admire to this day, Katie Lynch at Social Katie. And I was reading about her starting the social media agency that worked with, all these incredible brands. And I thought, wow, if there's a social media agency that existed for my business, I would have hired them, and I would have paid them money. So I thought, she's building a great firm that serves enterprise level brands. There's probably an opportunity for me to build a brand for the small business. So literally that day, I kind of Herb Keller-esque, Southwest Airlines style, sketched out a business plan on a napkin on my dining table. I don't have that napkin anymore, unfortunately, but definitely, came up with some of the building blocks of what a toy store retail outlet might want in a social media agency.
And so what was the evolution like of that? What kind of customers did you end up serving, et cetera?
The cool opportunity with that one is that I had a business partner. And so we both really wanted to think about how we serviced these retail and smaller brands. What we learned very quickly is that toy stores like mine couldn't really afford the labor or the manpower that was needed to create, social media posts at scale. Back then, if you recall, Facebook and Instagram, I don't think was around, really needed a ton of posts to get to that organic reach that you were looking for, right? So that content production was the kind of irritant in terms of being able to price competitively for that small business. So we did pivot. and landed TransUnion as one of our first clients. And it was the most interesting assignment ever. I had never actually probably run Facebook ads at scale, but they basically like said, "Hey, Aalap, like send us over an IO." Mind you, like I don't even know what an IO is, because we want you to run like a follow campaign for us, and can you get them for X amount of dollars per like? Of course, being the entrepreneur, I'm like, yes, of course, like I'll do this, like, and then I call like 5 friends to figure out what an IO is, right? But that one client really opened the doors for us by having such a big name, and got us it got us ahead of all of our competitors, because back then social media agencies were popping up like a dime a dozen, right? So it gave us the leg up by having a marquee client like that to start tapping into what turned out our niche was like kind of real estate, professional services, and kind of B2B firms. Really a different pivot than what I was anticipating.
So IO is
an insertion order. I never knew. I would never, I remember talking to my client. He was the kindest. I mean, just when you think about like, people that support your business and those angels that come in at pivotal moments, like John was just such a angel, because he probably knew that I had no idea what he was talking about, but he gave me the grace to figure it out and send him, the IO that I could find on one of those template sites.
So running that didn't scare you away from starting another one?
It turned out to be a fertile ground for me to learn about how to build the experience that I wanted to, right? So in between kind of owning that agency, I picked up an Amazon business, which kind of points to the evolution of how 108 came to be. And I picked up that Amazon business because I really learned by doing. Like everything that I offer at my agency is something that I've learned how to do in one way, shape, or form. And so I wanted to learn Amazon because I saw that as a critical growth opportunity. It wasn't yet a commodity service from any other agency. And I sold fishing gear. I sold fishing belts and gaffs. And I'm actually vegetarian. I've never gone fishing in my entire life. And I actually sold it because I actually felt bad about selling stuff that, killed fish.
Sold the company, eventually?
I sold the Amazon business eventually because I just couldn't reconcile it with being vegetarian. But it was a really interesting and awesome experience because I got to learn the ins and outs of Seller and Vendor Central and be able to speak to my clients and understand like the pain points. And that's kind of why I take such a deep dive into learning about every service I offer. Because if I can't understand it or the pain points that are associated with it, like, how can I prove our expertise or even like create results for you, right? And so owning that Amazon business gave me the confidence to launch an agency that was just focused on consumer.
And to kind of complete go full circle here for a second, there is a toy company that you help with 108.
Yeah. So what I love the most about my business today, so I had an opportunity to exit my past agency. And, I just want to share this little clip here of it was kind of an insane week. I sold that company on a Monday. I started 108 on the Wednesday, and my third baby was born on November 11th. So it just all happens in 1 week. And that's just kind of how I roll, I feel. And what 108 has given me the opportunity to do is build a company that really draws on this insane amounts of retail experience I have from my past and present. And one of the most beautiful things is that I get to work and build connections with toy companies. And so I have gotten to work with some of the most, like I think the top, 10 companies out there in the toy world, including brands like Tomy and Ty, and just have been able to use my retail expertise. So here's how it's all coming full circle, to really drive those insights and create ongoing momentum for those brands on social media.
And when we were talking about the toy company, you mentioned TikTok.
What I love about this opportunity that I have is TikTok is one of those things that brands are trying to figure out how to harness, right? It's a lot of influencer based work. It's a lot of like video and music driven content. And a lot of brands are still trying to figure out how to tap into this really rich audience that's just obsessed, right? And so the assignment was really twofold. How do we grow our e-commerce revenue? And then secondly, how do we grow our TikTok? Not only audience, but just our traffic from that audience. And what's so special about this assignment is that we're working to connect these lovable toys with both a Gen Z audience and then, of course, families, right? Like, what are those moments and occasions that you need, not even need, but you want to make extra special with these products? And I think it's been so much fun creating content, being a content creator, working with influencers, and then really driving astronomical growth in that follower. I think we're up to, at least I think when I last looked at the numbers, we're up 200,000 followers on TikTok. And that's really just because of curating content, working with the influencers, and building a story that's evergreen.
You mentioned one of my favorite interviews, at least the beginning, was with Natural Stacks. And it was, he actually walked through a little bit what was a pivotal moment were some influencers and some people who help with the brand. I'm wondering, what are ways you reach out to these influencers to connect with them? Because ultimately you're connecting the influencer to the brand to help drive more awareness.
It's all about relationships, right? It's all about relationships. It's not just about who you know in the influencer world, but it's really planting the seed. An influencer that has, 1 million followers on their platforms has really no reason to believe in you, no matter how big your brand is or how big your budget is. But really connecting with them, viewing and reviewing their content, pitching them stories that you think are going to resonate with them and their audience, and really thinking about it from how is it going to help grow their business, right? Because as they affiliate with your brand, they're going to have to turn around and talk to their followers about why they're doing what they're doing. So some of the tips I would say is really figuring out not only who's the right influencer for your brand, but how are you going to connect with them? How are we going to make them feel like they're part of the story that you're trying to tell? And how can they contribute to that story? And that creative, like co-sharing that creator control, has created some magical moments for us across the board.
Do you have a philosophy on the types of people that you reach out to? I know some people say, well, I don't really want the person that's over 2 million. Maybe they're too busy and I don't want someone under a certain amount. Do you have a certain range that's a sweet spot for you?
I want the right person that's going to connect with my persona that I've developed, right? So whether they have 1,000 followers or they have 5 million, I'm not necessarily worried about the follower count. I'm more concerned about, are they going to be able to connect with my end consumer that I want to reach, right? And that's really important to me. And I know it sounds fluffy, but we can often overlook creators out there because we're so focused on like, okay, here's the 5 filters I'm going to set, like location, location, like follower count, whatever it is, view impressions, all that stuff. I could get all the views I want, but how about if they were all paid, right? Like, so I am always talking to my clients about like, let's find the ideal set of folks that could connect and resonate with their end consumer.
Yeah. So you're really mapping out that persona just to make sure there's a tight match there. And that brings us into, I know one thing you're excited about lately is a retention and engagement.
I am really, really excited about this because there's a couple of factors that have come together in the industry. One is that iOS 14 or 15 or whatever version we're talking about has kind of wrecked our ROAS model that most agencies have really highlighted over the past couple of years, right? That was kind of the claim to fame for many agencies, that we could get a 12, 14, 20x ROAS. So that's one kind of factor there. The cost of customer acquisition has gone astronomically high because all of a sudden we're all looking for people to buy online now. right? So you're competing against many brands. And then now you have other influences like, political campaigns and all those things that are happening that are just kind of really disruptive in that new customer acquisition stance. So we have access to, or have had access to over 1,000 e-commerce brand analytics. And what I found after studying them is that more often than not, less than 20% of your visitors to your site drive that 50, 60, 70% of your revenue at oftentimes 2x the conversion rates that your new customers are. So like what I find myself in a lot of conversations is, hey, we want to drive growth and we're really looking for new customers. And what I'm really counseling my clients on is it's always good to find new customers, right? We've always got to feed the machine. What if we took some time and try to get that returning customer to 30% or 40%? How does your business change? What are other things that we can sell or get in front of them? Or is there ad creative and messaging that we can test with our existing customer base that we can then use to get new customers? So really focusing on that retention and loyalty model, whether it's paid ads, whether it's email marketing, SMS, even social media, right? Like I love this conversation because we're actually generating increased profitability for our clients much more quickly than spending insane amounts just on pure new customer acquisition. And that's not something I find a lot of conversations are happening. It's almost often on like, my Facebook ads aren't working. Great. That's a great conversation starter, because how can we make your Facebook ads work for your returning customers? How do we get them back to the table again? How do we get them to explore the things that they may have left in their cart through Klaviyo or SMS? Those are conversations that are really exciting to me right now.
I'd love to hear, because you mentioned a couple: SMS, text, social media, cart abandonment. What are some of let's say an e-commerce brand is listening right now and they're like, what's one or two tips they should be like, what's some low-hanging fruit? They're like, okay, if you're not doing this, go and do this right now. That would help with the retention and engagement.
One of the hidden gems in any email marketing program is those automated flows and how tight that integration is with your Shopify or your platform of choice. And what I say is, one low-hanging fruit is just like how those triggers are being set up. So browse abandonment or upsell, cross-sell, whatever it may be, right? And how it's interacting. What I find is that those flows have been set up by an agency or your brand maybe a year or two ago, and they don't even match up to the current branding today. And there's sometimes an overemphasis on just campaigns. When I talk about campaigns, that's that Memorial Day sale email that's coming out in a week or two. Go back and take a look at all your automated flows. Have you maxed it out to the hilt? And how's that messaging looking like? And man, are those discount codes still valid in those flows, right? That's some of the lowest hanging fruit, I'd say. And then the next thing I immediately would tell you is when you look at your email pop-up on your website, have a space for a phone number. Let's get that first party data, because it's like gold right now. Being able to, of course, with consent, not only being able to text your customers, but then also use it on platforms like Facebook to build audiences, it's super valuable. So I'd say that those are two things that you can take action on relatively quickly and see good return on investment on.
Yeah, I was talking to my 10-year-old daughter the other day about direct response marketing, and because they were doing some kind of class project, and I was saying, it's about not only the messaging, but the medium of the messaging. Where would you send the medium? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, if I send it your email, should I send your email or your phone? She's like, oh, I read all my text. I go, even if it's like not from someone you know? Yeah, even if it's someone I know. I go, exactly. So it's not just the messaging, it's actually where the message is being sent. So I love that. And I think, what you say applies to any business, really, Aalap, which is retention. We all kind of, myself included, follow the shiny object, the new customer, but it's really the engagement and retention of the existing ones that is easier and costs less money as well, right?
I completely hear you on that. And it's a great ground for you to test new creative, new copy, like offers. Like if your existing customers are not responding to that, then why would you expect a new customer to, right? And oftentimes we spend thousands of dollars on testing all this really cool and awesome creative, which by the way, I'm a big believer in, to new customers, but then we're disappointed in the results. And that's like, you have kind of a built-in focus group of super fans in most cases that you can test this out to.
You know, we also talked a little bit about D2C revenue declining and what's happening there as things have opened up, and even, you know, people's behavior has changed a little bit. What have you seen with that?
So maybe two perspectives I can give you from like an accounting, you know, being a CPA hat. To me, revenue is revenue, no matter where it comes from. Where I'm seeing some angst and a lot of conversations happening is that incredible growth that we saw over the last 2 years in e-com revenue is falling off. And some of that revenue is going to retail. And to me, this is an opportunity for my clients and any CPG client to say, hey, I want to be where my consumer's shopping, whether it's at CVS or Target or Thrive Market or my website or Amazon. I want to make sure I have a solid presence across the board. And what we're doing here is building pretty rich dashboards that tap into those APIs at those retailers. We work with a fragrance company right now that has presence at places like Ulta and Sephora and Target, but a strong presence in Amazon and D2C. And we had partnered with them to really look at this data from an omnichannel perspective. And what's fascinating is that it comes down to even how you think about creative to drive to retail versus your D2C, right? So really being nuanced in how you approach marketing to serve those two. One is kind of like, hey, can I drive trial and discovery and maybe an experience almost at the retail level? And then how do I get that reorder and subscription on my website? So that's what I'm kind of really excited, continuously to work on with my partners.
I love what you're saying there, because so what are some of the ways that you go from online and take them offline, like driving them to retail? How does that work?
Well, one of my favorite companies that I know of is Nugs. I believe they changed the name to Simulate now. It's like a vegan chicken nugget. And for a long time on their website, you could like kind of send 5 nugs to a friend. And whether it be a coupon or it could be that you can redeem at a retailer, or whether they actually physically send you the product, I thought it was just a great way for them to get an offer, get you in store, support your retail partner. That's a huge win. And then like actually experience your product, right? So I think anything that you can do, and I'm not sure why this is so complicated, and someone's got to come up with an innovation around coupon or digital coupons to create redemption or trial opportunities. I'm like super curious about that right now. But I know that like for a fragrance perspective, like how do you get someone to smell online, right? Like, so how do you make it easy to send a sample packet to a consumer that might drive them to retail to actually use a product tester, right? So like incentivizing people to go there by having a strong offer, or partnering up with like the loyalty apps that Target or CVS or anyone has to drive that discovery is huge. So as you may know, like Kroger, CVS, Target, all these places are coming out and rolling out with their own digital networks and platforms. And I see huge opportunity to like really extend some of the digital work that we do, creative copy, all that good stuff, into those platforms to drive that trial or discovery.
Yeah, thanks for that. And you also worked with, of all things, a linen company.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite companies. It's a client that I've had for over 3 years. They're a great fitted sheet company, and we've really grown with them. They're pure D2C and Amazon with a little bit of presence in retail. And what we're seeing here is this conversation that we've just had about retention and engagement. So if we could increase our customer lifetime value, it can unlock astronomical growth. And a lot of the way that we're doing that is some of this low-hanging fruit that we're talking about, but it kind of the evolution, especially when you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on paid media, is going to be building creative and rapidly iterating on it to just test and learn. So we did a full day photo shoot. We got a ton of content last fall. We've used it in lots of different ways throughout the year, but more recently we created a TV spot that's hilarious, and it's for just connected TV. So, we're going to try that out and see what happens. Just to think about, how do we drive people to remember this company and be that fridge magnet, right? But an interesting fridge magnet that kind of changes or has GIFs or static images or carousel as you're thumbing through all your news feeds to get you to incentivize to buy again.
For some reason I don't picture hilarious TV spot in linen, so I have to go watch this. But that's what kind of comes to mind with something like that is how do you differentiate, right? I mean, linens. Is that what some of the things you're thinking about when you're doing advertising, whether it's online or offline?
Well, they have some patent technology, which I think is their differentiator. And they're also competing against the parachutes and like Brooklyn Linens of the world, right? So I think there's a couple different ways that you can differentiate. It comes down to sometimes price. It comes down to comfort. It comes down to maybe product assortment. What I love about this company is that they're very, very focused on their product and the feel, the fabric, the quality, and the use case of it. And that's a challenge because when you think about changing your sheets, how easy is it to go to a retail store like Kohl's or Target to buy that, right? Without even thinking about it. But when you think about the occasions and just the pain of like getting that sheet around the corner, at the bed corner, that's a pain point that they're solving for, and they're doing it brilliantly. So I feel very strongly that they have that point of view, and it's our job to think about how we creatively showcase that kind of zipping function that they have as part of their technology.
Aalap, I want to just thank you. I have one last question. Before
Yes.
I ask it, I just want to thank you for sharing your journey and your stories. And I want to encourage people to check out your website, which is 108.agency. Are there any other places online? And it's actually the letter O, not zero. So 108.agency. Are there any other places online we should point people towards?
Yeah, absolutely. I have my own website. It's alapshah.com. So definitely check that out. I'll put some of these brands that I mentioned in your show notes for people to check out. But yeah, those are the best places to get to me.
Yeah. And it's spelled AALAPSHAH.com. So last question up is mentors. Who are some of the mentors? We all stand on the shoulders of giants. Who are some of the mentors that helped you in business? And it could be virtual, just because you got their book, or it could be actual mentors from groups like EO or anyone else. Who are some of the mentors that have helped you?
I feel strongly that I'm here today because of exactly what you said. I have an insane appetite for questions and asking people things I don't know about. And so the list is way too long. However, over the past decade, I'd say that David Sheehan at A3 Partners has just been an amazing, amazing mentor and advisor and friend and coach as I built this agency and just in my past experiences. And then Justin Demies has been just such a great champion of me and 108 and the work that we do here. So I'm really thrilled to call them my friends and mentors. And I would have to say that my wife, who's right behind me on the wall, just when you think about people that support you and like help you rise to the top, like in the highs and lows of being an entrepreneur, she's been there every step of the way. So couldn't have done it without her.
Love it. Thank you. I'll be the first one to thank you. Check out 108.agency, check out Inspired Insider, check out Rise 25. And thanks. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Aalap.
Thanks, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100 grand.